So I read the book called Gentle Discipline. I love that book. I read it a few times, and at the time I couldn't find information out there, or I wasn't seeing it enough. And I kind of wanted affirmation for myself that, hey, this is right, and this is the way it should be, right? Because a lot of times in our subconscious, we know what's right, but we don't know how to get it out, or we're not seeing enough of it in our environment or in the people around us to live that out. How you feel, or what is your take on gentle discipline?
Sure. So I was trained by Laura Markham in peaceful parenting, which is very, very similar. And so I became trained as a parent coach because folks were coming to me. My therapy clients would say, "I'm doing fine now. I'm not as anxious anymore. I'm not as depressed, but my child is tantruming, and I don't know how to handle that. Or I know what not to do, but I don't know what to do." And so I became trained in this modality because, just as you're saying, a lot of parents are looking for strategies, but they don't know what else is out there. Yeah. And so, one of the questions I ask parents is, project forward and then project back. How do you want your child to remember this time? Do you want them to remember you being stressed out and running around and yelling at them a lot? Or do you want them to remember it as a warm family time or a close time where they felt attached to you and things were generally peaceful and things, we kind of were pulling in the same direction. So I think it's important for parents to consider what they want their child to remember this time as, and also how they want their child to be in the future. So I think, you can ask yourself, when I'm looking back on my life, do I want to remember it this time with my children as a stressful time, as a time when I was harried and running around and focusing on what was ultimately not so important? Or do I want it to be a time of warmth and connection and love? Now, do I want my child to be self-motivated and kind and thoughtful? I imagine those are traits that we want our kids to have, but a lot of times we get so caught up in the moment that we're not really thinking about that. We're not thinking that far ahead. So what I like to do when I'm coaching clients is to really give them a North Star. So they know even when they're stressed and tired, they know how to handle a situation and they'll be proud of how they handled it, as opposed to regretful or ashamed or embarrassed. And I think a lot of times, when our children work our last nerves, which they do, when we get tired and just frustrated, we're not behaving in the best way. We tend to revert to what we know. So if you grew up with parents that were yelling at you, or very harsh or punitive or bribed you, guess what you're going to do when you're stressed out? Unless you have a plan. Unless you've given real consideration and thought to the alternatives. And that's really where the coaching and the therapy come to play, because that gives people a roadmap. That gives people a way to, okay, I know what not to do. I don't want to do it that way. I know what it was like to be on the receiving end as a child. When my dad got really scary and yelled at me, that stopped the behavior, but it did not help going forward because I was scared. It did not improve the relationship I had with my dad. I was fearful of him. So I tiptoed around him, or I got sneaky. I went behind his back, or I wasn't truthful.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
The fear. Many parents believe because they see that immediate reward or the immediate behavior that they
stops.
See,
sure.
They think that it's working. But can you tell us what is happening to the child in that moment? What are they registering? And how is it going to affect their relationship in the future with that parent?
Well, imagine if somebody's twice as big as you and they start to yell at you. That's really scary. So what's happening for the child? You have cortisol and adrenaline pumping through their body, which means the prefrontal cortex is shutting down. So they're not taking in a lesson. They're stopping because they're scared about what you're going to do or what's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
So they're not stopping because, oh, gee, I rethought it, and I shouldn't be hitting my brother because that's the wrong thing to do. Yeah. They're stopping it because I'm scared you're going to hurt me, or you're going to yell at me, or like I said, hurt me in some way. That's why they're stopping. Now, is that the right reason to stop the behavior? I mean, to my way of seeing it, we want our kids to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Yeah. Not because someone's going to punish them or yell at them or they're going to get caught. And really, I think, as parents, we want our kids to have that inner North Star, that compass. where they know, okay, even if nobody's watching, I'm going to do the right thing. As opposed to, well, I'm doing it because someone's giving me a reward, so I'm going to do it. Or someone's going to hurt me if I do it or I don't do it, so I'm going to make sure I do what they're asking. But as soon as they look away, as soon as that reward is taken away, I'm going to do whatever. I'm not going to do what they're asking.
So, for example, a male child with an aggressive, dominant father figure. That male child is learning how to, is going to mimic, or what is a better word?
You're modeling how to be in the world. If they see you as a male child or a female child, sees their adult, that's how they're handling stress and anger. They get scary. They yell. They stomp around. They throw things. They hit people. Guess what they're going to do? You're going to see kids that are aggressive with their own peers. Kids that become adults that become aggressive with their own kids. Because that's what they learn. You're modeling how to be in the world. That it's okay to do that. It's okay to use fear and force. So, you're teaching the lesson, might makes right. And we wonder why kids in the playground, they will, they push another kid to the ground because they want that toy that kid has. They want the ball.
My next question. Is that where bullying comes from?
Sure. They learn, bullies tend to be bullied. They tend to learn that from their families. It doesn't come from out of the blue. They're taught that. So I think that also being very mindful, again, how do you want your child to be in the world? You want them to be kind and respectful and empathic. You have to model that yourself. So if you do yell at your child, again, guess what you're showing them? This is how you handle upset. This is okay. This is acceptable. So I think that being very mindful and cognizant that I want my child to learn how to be in the world in a way that is, again, respectful. And ultimately, I think that is what creates for a successful person.
Yeah.
It's not the money, but it's it's a legacy that you leave, the behavior that you have, the relationships that you have. That's truly what's important. So again, looking back on your life, that to me is what, reflecting on what is it I really want to leave as my legacy. Hopefully it's children that are respectful and that are, they're good people.
That make the world a better place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, going to the bullying, right? When a child is learning from their parent how to behave, how to handle stress, how to handle anger, how to handle life, and they're learning from the parent how to do those things by watching the model, like you said, that the parent is modeling before their children. When they're going out there, they're not necessarily thinking about how to react. It's going to come from within. So whatever the parent is teaching them, whatever they're being raised with, they're going to automatically, it's going to be a part of them until they learn how to undo, go through the therapy, go through the counseling, how to undo all of that to find inner peace, right? So how do we get to the children? How can parents better themselves, learn what they need to learn to become the parent that they know deep down inside that they want to be what they should be? How can they get to that place to help their children?
Well, I get asked the question, is it too late? I have a teenager, I have a 3-year-old. Is it too late? I've been asked that question, with toddlers. Is there anything I can do now? Because it feels like I've blown it. And my answer is, it is never too late. You can always make a difference. You can always pivot.
So 50, 60, 70, it's never too late.
Of course not. Of course not. And obviously, I hope that people kind of choose to change their behavior ahead of time. Before they retire. It's much easier, especially with kids. When I work with kids, with the parents that have, toddlers or young children, as opposed to teenagers, it's different because the behavior oftentimes is more entrenched, but it is absolutely still possible to change. It's never too late. But I think that it is, it's incumbent upon us to have hope and to show that we can always change. If we choose to do something differently, then we can. It takes effort.
I have a question.
Sure.
If we're able to say, I'm sorry, I apologize, I made a mistake. When we have that attitude that it is never too late to change, then our children are going to have the same attitude. Oh, I made a mistake, let me apologize, and let me fix it.
So that is a huge component to peaceful parenting, is when we make a mess, we clean it up. So it's not necessarily I'm going to frog march my kid to the other kid and say, you have to apologize, say I'm sorry. That's not a genuine apology. Instead, how do you make amends? Think about it. I'm not going to force you to say I'm sorry right this second, but if you want to go think about ways to fix the situation, then you can do that. I'd like you to do that by tonight. I don't think it has to be open-ended, but I think it can be directed. But I think the kind of the forced apology isn't really teaching our kids to be better people. But instead, it's when you spill something, you clean it up. When we make a mess, we try to fix it. Now, kids also oftentimes need some direction. Well, let's think about some ideas. What could you do? You hurt your friend's feelings. What are some things you could do to make them feel better? Okay, you can draw a picture. Yes. You can give them a hug the next time you see them. Yes. You can go tell them you're sorry, of course. But giving kids in that mindset that you make the repair. And some people, adults included, have a real hard time admitting that they made a mistake. They feel, I'm the parent. I can't admit to my kid that I messed up. That means I lose my authority. And so that sets up kids that have a very tough time apologizing themselves. And it shows your child that, you're not willing to own your own stuff, your own mistakes. So how do we expect them to do that if you are not willing to say I'm sorry? Because you will make a mistake. You will sometimes yell at your kid or do something that you're going to regret.
Yeah.
What do you do about that? You go back and you say to your child, I thought about what I said, and it didn't come out the way I wanted, and I'm sorry. Let me say that again. Let me say it in a different way. Or, you know what? Again, I yelled at you, and I really shouldn't do that. I'm really trying not to. Now, I think it's hard for a lot of parents to admit in that way to their kids that they made a mistake. Oh, my child's going to hold it against me. They're going to lord it over me. I don't think that's the case. I think your child learns, oh, mom's human. Yeah, that's okay. She's fallible. That's okay. And she fixes it. She makes the repair. That's what we want our kids to do, ultimately.
So I know that gentle discipline can be tough at first to begin, because what you're doing is you're completely shifting the way that parenting should be to a new norm. Can you give us any tips for how can we make that shift easier, or can you give us some understanding?
Well, I think, as you say, anything you do for the first time is harder than it will be eventually when you get more used to it, when that's just your go-to. So you have to be a little more thoughtful. It takes a little more effort at first, because it's not as natural as it will be when it's just something you just do. I think, too, for families, when they're starting to pivot and try something else, oftentimes kids, I hear this from parents when they try peaceful parenting. Well, my child cries a lot more, or they're a lot more emotional. Okay, that's a good thing. When your child trusts you to show them the emotions that they've been stuffing, that they've been bottling up, they finally, the cork pops and out all the stuff, comes that they've been hiding or kind of stuffing down or not feeling safe with you to share. Well, now they feel safe enough with you to share those things. Now that can feel like a real burden sometimes. I come home from work, all I want to do is make dinner and get everything out the door, get everybody settled and get the evening going. And my child is like, having a tantrum, or they're crying, or they're really emotional, and gosh, it's so much work. It was easier before, and I would just kind of yell at them, they would button up, and that would be the end of that. But it's that short-term versus long-term thinking. You want your child, it's an honor and a privilege when your child trusts you enough to have a tantrum in your presence. Why? Because they're waving a flag saying, I need your help, and I know that you can help me. As opposed to, that's why parents will ask me, why does my child give me such a hard time? They are an angel with, the nanny and the teachers and grandma and everybody else. They seem to behave perfectly. With me, all of a sudden, it's like, they're just a hot mess. Very emotional and and that's because your child has been saving that up, bottling that up. The cork pops when you're there, and they're able to show you all the good, the bad, and the ugly. They trust you to help them with that.
So what is a tantrum?
Tantrum is when children get overwhelmed. It's a rush of emotion. And for kids, all emotions are big, right? When they're happy, it's the greatest thing in the world. When they're sad, it's a tragedy. When they're angry, they see red, and they have these. It's all very, behavioral based. And so when children are having that overwhelm, that again, their systems are overloaded, and they're not thinking clearly, they're not being rational. It's like we as adults, when we fly into a rage, you're not thinking clearly. Again, prefrontal cortex is shutting down. You're just full of it's all emotion.
Could it be a mixture of emotions, like need for attention, sadness, anxiety, overwhelming? Maybe there can be other things.
Sure, but when you ask your child, how are you feeling? They might not be able to tell you. Or if you say, gosh, you seem angry right now, they might blow up at you and say, what do you mean I'm angry? Because no one wants to be labeled or categorized. Again, if your partner were to say to you, geez, you look angry right now, you'd be like, what the heck? Of course I'm angry. You would not take that really well. So children are the same way, oftentimes. They don't want to be put under the microscope. But instead, if you're able to be empathic, if you're able to be the calm in the storm, throwing water on their fire, not gas.
I talk about this in my book, rest. It takes a long time for us to understand that rest is important. And I know that it can be hard to find time to rest. We're talking about rest in New York City.
Yeah, good luck. The city that never sleeps, right?
So, how is rest important for the mind and for parents?
Well, I think, sleep is the base of the pyramid. When you're not sleeping well or your child's not sleeping well, everything is harder. Now, rest is obviously a component of that because we also need time to check out. We need breaks. And so in a city like this where people are going, morning, noon, and night, and we kind of push and push and push, we just go. We pick up our kids at 6 o'clock, we get them home, we wonder why they're acting out or, their behavior isn't ideal. They're tired. And again, one of the questions I'll ask parents is a question they can ask themselves when their child is not behaving as they want them to be. Are they hungry or are they tired? If these basic needs are not being met, of course their behavior is going to suffer. That's understandable. Same thing for us, right? When we get hangry, we don't behave very well. So the need to rest and to dial it back and to slow things down, I think is important. Particularly in a city like this where it's all about go. People are rushing around. They want to kind of cram everything in. Yeah. Realizing that, no, I need to slow it down. It's okay not to have every single thing checked off my list. If it's going to cause problems, if my child is going to suffer because I'm taking them to that last store, that last errand before we came home, and they're telegraphing and they're waving that flag, I can't handle this. And you wonder why they're having a tantrum in the grocery store. Because they're overloaded. It's just too much. So taking breaks, slowing things down. It's okay to be bored. I think sometimes as parents too, we want to kind of plan our kids' lives out so they're never bored. And we feel this.
Bring them back to being a priority.
Well, they need to be the priority, but also, this busyness, I think we conflate with, having a good life. Oh, we're so busy, we're so active. As if that's the goal, as opposed to, the quality time that we have with each other. I work with parents and their kids are in all different kinds of activities. Again, they wonder why they don't feel particularly close to that child. Well, they don't see that child very much. Yeah. The child is, in school all day and activities all night, and then, there's no time for connection.
Yeah. And then the guilt of that. You're working, you're trying to accomplish a goal. Some people are accomplishing a dream, you have your hobbies, you're trying to stay fit. As parents, okay, single mothers. Let's talk about single mothers. You're trying to stay fit. You're cooking, you're cleaning,
There's no, party coming in to help you out. There's no, cavalry coming in to rescue you. You're it. And so that, I have a special place in my heart for single parents, knowing how challenging that is. My mom was a single mom. When she raised us, it was a lot. But I think that, if you're not incorporating rest, if you're not incorporating self-care, if you're never on the list, not even on the bottom of the list, if you're not even on the list, that's a problem. And again, you're modeling to your child. When you become a parent, you become a martyr. Your own needs don't count.
Tell us about the mind of the child.
Mind of the child. Well, I was shocked to learn that children's brains don't mature until they're 25. I got married when I was 24, so go figure.
Okay. I was thinking 30, actually. I was thinking, you tell us.
Yeah, maybe it's somewhere in between, but from what I've read, it's around 25 is when the brain is fully mature. Okay. So that means that when we expect our kids to be behaving as rational all the time, or we get very frustrated when they feel like, well, that's, why are you doing that? I don't understand.
I love this.
seeing it from that point of view. I challenge parents. So can you see it from your child's point of view? You don't have to agree with it, but arguing with them and trying to argue them out of the position is not ultimately helpful. You can seek to understand. Oh, okay, of course you want to stay up later. You're having a lot of fun watching the show or having a great time playing a board game as a family. You don't want it to end. You want to stay up. I understand. And it's bedtime. So how do we make this a little more fun? Should we put on some music as you go brush your teeth? See, I mean, it's. I think parents, confuse peaceful parenting or gentle parenting as being permissive parenting, and it's not. You have high expectations and high levels of support, and so it's not that there are no rules or no boundaries. There are, but you enforce them in a gentle way. You enforce them with kindness, with empathy, as opposed to harshness and punishment or bribery. And that to me is the peace and peaceful parenting comes from you as a parent. That's what you bring to the equation. And people forget that. I think they don't realize that they expect their children to do what they say when they say it, and they get frustrated when that's not the case. As opposed to looking at, well, let me see why. Maybe my child doesn't feel connected to me. If I'm barking orders at them across the room, and I had to say something 5 times, and I don't have their attention when I'm talking to them, they're not going to listen. But instead, if you go up to them, put your hand on their shoulder and say, hey, can I ask you something? You have their attention. You're interrupting whatever they're doing, but you have their attention. Then much more likely to understand and hear you and respond and listen to what you're saying and do what you ask.
I love that. The mind is such a fascinating thing. When you really get to understand where your child's mind is at every stage in their life. For instance, toddlers, they think differently than 3 or 4 years. Sure. Right? And between the ages of 1 and 2, the mind is different. It's at a different stage. Between the ages of 2 and 3, it's different. 3 and 4, it's
evolving.
It's evolving. So when we're disciplining our children, if we're not placing the right expectations, it can be frustrating for them to try to meet up to what we think.
Of course, and the root word of discipline is to teach. It's not to punish. And I think a lot of parents conflate discipline with punishing. And that's really, to me anyway, that's not the way to have your child learn how to do things in a better way. You have to teach them how to do that. And when you're 1 year old or 2 years old, you're still your brain isn't mature. You don't know how the world works. So I think being able to adapt to where your child is important. And I work with a lot of parents for whom their children can be mistaken for being older. Either they're very mature in a certain area or they're taller than other kids. So people treat them as if they were older. Yeah. And they wonder why. Gosh, my child still behaves like a 5-year-old. Well, they're 5 years old. There's a reason. Yeah. So in other words, having reasonable expectations, understanding the child's brain, knowing that they're acting immature because they're immature. Their brains are immature. You're expecting a lot from somebody who's only 5 years old or 10 years old, 15 years old, when they're showing you that they can't handle that, or they need help to handle it, or they need to be taught or shown or guided. Not broken and not punished and not yelled at.
At the age of 18, right, a lot of parents think, okay, they are adults now. They don't need to be at home anymore. I don't need to help them. What do you think about that?
I don't think the day somebody turns 18 means that they're ready to be, pushed out the door. Granted, every child is different, but I also think that it's reasonable to expect kids to still want guidance and some help. In other words, we want our kids to still turn to us to look for, support and guidance and in a reasonable way.
Yeah. At 18, they're just finishing high school. They don't know how to be an adult yet.
Yeah, their brains aren't mature for another 7 years or so.
Yeah.
So understanding that and knowing that, just because somebody's 18 doesn't mean they're going to behave in necessarily a mature way. No, there are a lot of 18-year-olds that are very mature people. But I think understanding that even if you're an adult, you don't always make great decisions. And understanding that and being able to help, provide that level of guidance and confidence. I think too, if you've done your job as a parent and you've kind of been ready to kind of launch your child at around 18 or so, they're still going to need some help and some support.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That is not a failure on your part or their part.
Parenting ever end?
It's a good question. It evolves. It changes. I think, that child is always going to be your baby, no matter how old they are. Now, I think things do change because you start to treat your child as more of a peer. In other words, it becomes less of a hierarchy where, you're at the top of the pyramid and your child is at the base. It becomes more co-equal as they become adults, as they become more, experienced and have better judgment. But in some ways, I think that they're always going to be your child.
Is there such thing as a perfect parent?
There is not. There is no perfect person. And I think if that's your goal, you're setting yourself up for failure, and your child. Because then you're modeling to your child, who, by the way, thinks that, at least for a long time, not when they're in the teen years maybe, but they think that you're perfect.
Yeah.
And if mom or dad is telling the world how, or showing people how bad they are, how frustrated they are, well, gosh, if mom's not perfect, I must be really bad. That's the message that you're sending to your child, as opposed to, yeah, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I own it. I make the repair, and that's okay. I'm a good person. I'm a good person because of who I am, not because of what I do. So if your child brings home a D, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It means they had a hard time on that test.
With that, is there a perfect solution? Is there a perfect formula for parenting? Is there a perfect way to be a parent for your children?
I think that I liken it to, like I said, it's a North Star. Nothing works perfectly every time. And I think that if you give parents that North Star, they learn that, okay, I've had people come back to me, well, that strategy didn't work. But that's why I give people a toolkit. All right, something's not going to work someday. Okay, so what else can you do? Using the same general, concepts behind it. The mindset, the application might be a little different, but I think if the general philosophy behind it is generally the same, then that's what, that's what's important. But no, there is no perfect solution, and not everything's going to work every time, and that's okay. But I think without that corollary, and that's okay, people set themselves up for feeling frustrated and disappointed. Well, you told me to do this and it's not working. Okay, well, let's take a look. Let's take a step back and let's look at the situation. Maybe your child, were they tired? Again, were they hungry? Were their basic needs being met? Did you explain what the expectation was for that situation before you went into it? Did you get frustrated after the fact because they were misbehaving or they weren't doing what you asked? Well, let's look at why. So I think it's I think parents tend to be very self-critical, and they wonder why kids are judge themselves harshly. Because if you model that to your child, that what you do again is bad or wrong, or you're not, you don't accept yourself for all of who you are, flaws and all, they're not going to do that either.
Yeah, because last question. Because in the mind of the child, they see you as perfect.
Up until around the teenage years, but maybe the tween years.
Here's the thing: they see you as, like you said, the center of the universe. But what happens when they see you when you're a peer to them, but you're treating them as if you're using words like stupid, you're calling names, you're saying they're
about themselves or about the
to the child. Because a lot of parents, they use that language. That's a part of their norm. That's what they grew up with. So when they see you as the center of the universe, and you're talking down on them, and you're not treating them like they're the universe as well. What is that doing to the child? When you're up here and you're teaching them that they're down there.
Well, I think parents that are very harsh with their children, it has a huge impact on their self-esteem and how they interact with the world. Maybe they'll react against that and become kind of belligerent or talk back or push back. Or maybe they go the other way and feel like I'm going to become pushovers, or they feel like, well, it's not worth it. I'm not a good person, so I don't deserve to be with a partner, for instance, that treats me well, or I don't deserve to expect people to respect. So I think it does have ramifications going forward, and ultimately, again, I circle back to how is it that you want your child to be in the world? You want them to be confident. You want them to be respectful and respected, and to have high expectations for how they expect from other people, but also to treat people with extreme respect too. So it's a two-way street. But I do think that you as a parent are so central and so important, have so much influence over your child. And therefore, if you want to make a change, it can happen at any time. It's never too late.
Thank you for coming out today. I know there's so much more that we can talk about. I mean, parenting can be so simple, but there's so much to it. So I encourage anyone, who's watching this video to go get therapy, go to the coaching, go to the seminars, to the conferences, learn as much as you can learn, but then draw back, practice that self-love, understand that it's not going to happen. Take it one day at a time. And over time, you're going to not only be building up your children, but you're going to be healing yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.